All right, guys, good afternoon and welcome to the International Association of Woodcarvers. Today is February the 19th, about 5 minutes after 3 p.m. We appreciate you all taking time out to join us today. Today on our meeting, we've got Kevin Applegate coming to us from Georgia. Kevin's going to be doing a demonstration on carving a hillbilly from a pattern that we provided out on social media. If anybody wants to carve along, or if you want to come back and watch this video, the pattern's available for you there. You can go back and follow along. Again, if you don't have that, or you need it, or you need us to send it to you, contact me, Dave, or Thom. We'll email it out to you. Just want to go through a few things before we turn it over to Kevin. I want to remind everybody to go out and check out Woodcarving Academy. On Woodcarving Academy, they have quite a few classes that are available out there. Some of the workshops that some of the carvers have been put on are out there now. You can do a subscription basis on that, a month, 3 months, or up to a year. They also advertise any workshops that's coming up. And again, I want to tell you a little bit about those. Right now, Dave Stetson has a class that's going to be starting on March the 12th. That's on carving the lady and gentleman friend. If you want to participate in that class, contact Dave Stetson, reach out to him. I think he's going to have some rough outs that you have to purchase. And you need to go ahead and get signed up. So when those rough outs are available, you can go ahead and purchase those and get ready for the class. Another class that's coming up is Janet Cordell. Her class starts on May the 9th, and she's going to be carving a bighorn sheep. So make sure you check that out. And if you're interested in that, contact Janet. I know there's a lot of shows that's firing up that's going to be happening in the summer and fall. So some of the workshops may slow down so people can participate in those workshops. One of the ones I'm going to talk about is the Carving in the Rockies. That's coming up in September, on September 24th and 25th. And I think Kevin's going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the meeting. Make sure you go out and check out Carving the Rockies. It's the show that the Caricature Carvers of America is going to be putting on. Again, they're going to have 6 instructors that's going to be doing classes. They'll have vendors there, and the CCA competition is going to be there this year. So make sure if you're interested in that, go out and check out the Caricature Carvers of America website, and all the information is there. And I think Thom's going to tag that in the YouTube video that we put out. Speaking of YouTube, make sure you go out and like and subscribe our YouTube page. That's International Association of Woodcarvers. We have about 80 videos out there. All the past meetings that we've had are available. Also, any demonstrations or live instruction. Those stay out there so that you all can go back and revisit those. So make sure you check that out. Also today in this meeting, we're going to be doing 2 giveaways. We're going to do a International Association of Woodcarving giveaway at the end of the meeting. That sign up has closed at this point, but we're going to give away a hat, a shirt, and stickers. We'll be doing that drawing at the end of the meeting. Also, Kevin has agreed to give us donate the carving that he's doing. He's going to finish it and paint it, and he's going to donate that. So we'll do a drawing for that carving as well at the end of this meeting. So Kevin, we appreciate you doing that for us. At this time, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Kevin Applegate. Again, he's coming to us from Georgia. He's going to be doing a carving on a block of a hillbilly. And again, he's provided that pattern. We'll make that available to you all. And thanks, Kevin, for coming on today. Thanks for spending your time with us. We've had on Kevin a few times in the past. We look forward to seeing what he shares today. So Kevin, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. First off, I just want to thank Blake and Thom and Dave for everything they do. I know this takes a lot of time. It's a bigger commitment than most people understand. So I just want to thank those guys because I think this is a great service that they're providing. Secondly, I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm going to treat this pretty much as one of my Zoom classes. So we're going to go right to the carving. If you have questions throughout the presentation, just feel free to interrupt me. It's perfect. It gets me a chance to breathe, which is always good. So what I have here is the pattern that I sent out, which is not completely necessary, but I know some people like a pattern and need some reference points to start. And you can do this from a triangle block, or you can also do it from about 1.5 inches thick block if you want to. You can cut that out, and if you don't have a way to get triangle blocks and you have a saw, you can go ahead and cut those out. I just lay it over the top and trace around it. And you can do one of two things after you've done that. You can either cut it out with your bandsaw, which does save a little bit of time and a little bit of muscle, or you can just use it as reference points and take it out with your knife. Because I know that everybody doesn't have a bandsaw, I decided to, even though the pattern's out there, to just carve this from a block. So everybody could just see, it's just a triangle block. It's a 2x2 that is cut in half into a triangle, and it's 6 inches long. So give me a second here and get ready. There we go. So you can see what I did here was the first thing I do is I take and I run a line down the edge of this block. And the reason I do that is to get a little bit of thickness for where that ear is going to be. And I just take that off, and I'm not necessarily going to that line. I'm just getting somewhere close, just so I have a little bit of thickness there on the edge of that ear. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is, the one thing about the triangle blocks for me is I don't want it to look like a triangle. Once you're done, I just don't want you to look at it and go, oh, that was done from triangle. So I go ahead and get a bunch of this front of that triangle off. I think it's shocking, you know, when I do these and I haven't, and I've actually cleaned my shop and I have a clean floor, it's amazing how much wood is on the ground at the end of one of these. You really take off a lot of wood. And I think that some people don't go as far as they could with taking off the wood. So that's the way I get the block started. I may or may not even draw these lines on it if I was just doing it. But also, if you don't have the pattern or don't want to download the pattern or whatever, another way to look at this is from this 6-inch block is the hat is about 2 inches down from the top, and the nose is just over an inch down from the hat. So, you know, maybe an inch and an eighth or something. And if you put those proportions in there, that gives you pretty good room to get what you need in there. Second thing I want to talk about is just how I like to carve in general. I like to get everything completely blocked in. Again, I think a lot of people get doing details before they're blocked in. And I think that gets you in trouble at times. And I always use the same analogy. So unfortunately, if you've watched any of my Zoom classes on Woodcarving Academy or whatever, you've heard this story 1,000 times, but I'm gonna say it again. So if you don't block everything in before you start with the details, the way I look at it is if you're carving a figure and you have 2 hands on the figure and you carve the greatest left hand known to man, but you didn't block in the right hand before you put the details on the left hand. And as you're doing the right hand, you take a little bit too big a chip out, all of a sudden it's gotten a little bit small now. Instead of being able to go back to the other side and make the other hand equal, because you have the details on there, you can't do that now. So now you end up with one big hand and one small hand. So even though you carved the greatest hand ever carved, it really doesn't look great on that carving. So I like to get everything blocked in, even if it's just a face. So this is where I'm going to go first. I'm going to get this hat blocked in. When I talk about blocked in, I like to, say that you can look at the carving and you can identify everything on it, even though there's no detail. You definitely know that's the hat. You know that that's some hair. You know that's a nose. You can see a mustache. You know those cheeks are there. You see sideburns. You see ears. You can see where the beard's going to go. And I really haven't done anything but straight cuts and chip cuts at this point. So that's where I'm headed. That's my goal. The other thing that I do that I think is helpful, it doesn't matter what, this usually pertains to rough outs more so than say a full cutout of a full body or something. But on these, it's pretty much the same. It doesn't matter what rough out you hand me, I'm always going to do the same thing. I'm going to go find the bottom of the nose and the side of the face. And when I find those two things, it's amazing how quickly that you can start carving and you can start getting where you're going. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to work on the bottom of this nose. And I just drew a straight line across there for now. I don't know where I'm going with it. The other thing I'd like to encourage you to do with these is just don't be so tense about where you're going with them. Just carve them. Whatever comes out, comes out. So there's the bottom of the nose, sort of. I do have to cheat a little bit here because this hat, to find the side of the face, I have to kind of get this hat in here, the bottom of this hat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Apologize if I get off camera here a little bit. I've got a different camera holder here. So I'm not 100% sure where I'm at most of the time. Like I said, so I found the bottom of the nose. Now I'm going to come in here and find the side of the face. And again, I talked about how much wood you got to remove. I'm going deep. I mean, that's pretty deep in there. I'll do the same thing over here. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and, just because it's easier to hold in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of this hat. You know, I don't have a center line on here per se right at the moment because it was pretty obvious where the center was when it was a triangle. So one thing I would say is I'd like to have this hat flop over. You know, you can see if this center line was here, the hat flops over from the center line. So I'm going to keep coming way over here and get some of this out of the way over here. I'll take a lot of this wood off. I don't know exactly where this hat's going to flop because, again, I don't really care. I'm just carving to carve. I'm not making a masterpiece here. This is just something for fun because I love to do faces. So this is just something for some fun. So I'm just going to pick a spot and get rid of some wood there. Also going to do it in the front just because it's a little bit of a time constraint. So I'm going to grab this big old 1¼ inch number 7 and get rid of some of this wood. If I was just sitting here leisurely carving, I'd probably just fiddle with it with a knife. But since we want to get a little bit further down the road, I'm going to go ahead and get some wood out of the way. All right, so there's the hat starting to get where it's going. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shape these ears just a little bit. I'm just going to take some triangles out here. You can see I've got this hat. I got to figure out which hat I have here. I've got this hat sort of flipping up a little bit like this one does. You can see that you can do whatever you want with them. You can see the tops of them are different. You can see this, the brown hat flops straight down over his ears. The green hat folds up a little bit over his ears. I'm just doing the folding up part a little bit. So all I'm doing is just taking a couple triangles out of here. Just a couple little wedges just to sort of define that. And I'm going to find the side of this ear here. I'm going to do the same thing. Get rid of some of it.
Hey, Kevin, we got some interest in the chat about what kind of knife you're using. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can, if I look and see which one it is. It's an OCCT knife. I don't know which model it is, but you can see it's one of their thinner ones. They've got some that are pretty wide, and this one is just thinner. I like a knife that comes to a point. I use this and I use a dunkel knife most of the time. Both of them you can see come to a pretty hard point down there, which can be a little problematic when it comes to maintaining them, but it's just the one I'm comfortable with, so that's what I like.
And is that a 2-inch blade, or
it's probably just over. The dunkels I know are 2 1/4. This is either 2 or 2 1/4, somewhere in there. So now I'm going to put this, this hair in the top. I'm just going to make some wedge cuts here and just break it. I was going to tell you the part about this is more fragile than it looks in a second, but I've already broken it. So now you know it's more fragile than it looks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put the wings of the nose in. And let's see if I can reach in here. I'm going to grab a gouge. A lot of times I do that with a knife, but this 6-inch part of this bottom makes it a little problematic. So I'm just going to get rid of those wings of the nose right there so I get them where I want them, or closer to where I want them. Just put in the side of the nose a little bit. Same thing here. All I'm doing is getting rid of all this excess wood here. And again, that's the part where it makes it not look like a triangle. You can see how much wood I have all over this apron I have on. There's a lot of wood moved. I think that hair is a little bit further down than I want it, so I'm just going to trim it up a little bit. Try to anyway. The other thing I would tell you about knives, and it has nothing to do with the blade, it has to do with the handle. I was told about this a long time ago, and I can't carve with a knife without it really now, is this wrap that I have on here. And when I tell you that it's tennis racket grip, that should make a lot of sense, that tennis racket grip can take a lot of pressure and not slip and do all the things that vet wrap will do. This is a knife that I've carved probably hundreds of hours with, and that tennis racket grip looks just like that still. It really is nice to keep the slippery handles from being a problem, or to give you a little bit of cushion on that handle. I've got 4 knives sitting here in front of me. They all have it on it. So it's something that's worth trying if you're having a hard time with your grips. All I'm doing here is just getting rid of some of the bottom of this. And the reason I'm doing that is just simply because I know I'm gonna change the shape of this beard. And rather than cut through the thick part of it, I'd rather just cut through these thin little spots. I didn't do that up here because I like to keep it flatter up there. But let me see here. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to put a really deep stop cut, the front of the ear, back of the sideburn. And when I say really deep, it's pretty deep. I mean, it's that deep in there. And you don't have to go in there and do it all in one pass. You can do several passes to get it in there. This is like a 12 millimeter, I think, something like that. Swiss number 7, and I just use this here because it's just a good shape for this. I really honestly don't care about what brand a tool is. Every tool I have because of the profile of the tool. If you look in my box that I've got sitting next to me, there's probably 5 different tool manufacturers in there, and they're probably pretty equally represented. And it's all about the profile of the tool. All right, so now we're starting to get there. We can definitely see where the ears are. We can see where the hat is. We can see where the nose is. The next thing I want to do, I don't put a mouth on a lot of these. This guy is meant to be pretty old and scraggly looking, and you know, I don't usually put a mouth on them. A couple of things I do here. So I don't really care about a mouth. And the other thing is, I don't really care if I even finish the mustache at the bottom. I rarely even worry about where it goes. You look at all of these mustaches just blend right in there. There's no end of it. Or I might, this one I ended it a little bit more than some. I usually don't worry too much about it. So when I do that, I'm also going to draw in these cheeks. This isn't Santa Claus. Santa Claus, I don't draw these saggy cheeks on. I keep his cheeks pretty round, but this is an old grizzled hillbilly who probably does have some saggy cheeks, doesn't get enough food maybe. So I'm going to go ahead and bring those way down. All I'm doing here is setting this nose back into the face a little bit. So I just take and put a straight cut where the mustache is, a straight cut at the bottom of the nose. And again, I go in there pretty deep. You don't have to do it all at one cut. You can take a few passes at it because they're just stab cuts. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this same thing going at the bottom of the mustache. All right. So there you go. We got quite a bit of definition of where we're going now. I'm going to take and go straight up this line where the sideburn and the cheek are going to be on both sides. And I'm holding the V-tool straight up and down, so it's just going straight in. I'm going to do this underside of the mustache. The thing you got to think about with this is if you hold this tool the way it gets in your hand, it's really, really easy to undercut this right here. I mean, it's really easy to undercut it. And if you undercut it, then your mustache gets way too small. So I actually lay it the other way and try and get that mustache to get a little bit bigger actually when I'm doing it. And again, I'm not even caring where I'm going with this line because I don't think I'm gonna finish the bottom of the mustache anyway. So I don't even really care where it goes. Oh, while I have it, I'm gonna go ahead and do this outside of the mustache. And again, this time I'm holding that V-tool straight up and down. So it's just making a small little channel there. Fight against the grain for a while, but I guess I should go back and make it a little better. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put these big, deep triangles right here. And all that's doing is just sinking that chin. How about the cheek? Sinking that cheek down in there. You can see on this one, see that big shadow down in there. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, so there we go. Starting to look hillbilly-ish. All right, so I'm going to take, as we've already seen, this is a little fragile up here. So I am going to put a stop cut up underneath this hair. Be a little careful here. It's easy for that knife to come out of there pretty easily. And I'm just going to get rid of a little bit of that. Set that. It sort of helps set the hat on the head instead of just sitting there. But it also makes this a little stronger. This is just a little bit too much hair, so I'm going to take some of that off. Take this right here. I'm going to put a little sort of a triangle cut here where the ear comes in behind the sideburn. Even though the sideburn is moving back right now, I'll move the ear back in a little bit. Same thing on the other side. All right. This guy's a little bit of a mess right in here. I don't know if that really helped. The other thing, I always have to see if I actually have done it before I say it, is, and it's not really good on either one of these, is I like to put a pretty big temple on the side of the face. You can do it many ways. You can do it with, sometimes if I have a V-tool in my hand, I just scoop it out a little bit with a V-tool. Sometimes I do it with a knife, but it does tend to leave a little bit of those stop cut marks. So I try and make it as clean as I can. I have this 1¼ inch number 5, and what I tend to do, mainly out of laziness, is just come in here and put those two big cuts in there like that. Now you can see he's got a little more shape to his face than just straight up and down. Again, I'm trying to avoid those knife cuts, so I'll come in here with a V-tool and get rid of those.
Hey, Kevin, another question in the chat. We want to know what size V-tool you use.
The one I use mainly is a 3/8. For me, I just think that's a nice size. I can get it in some small spaces, and I can take a lot of wood out with it at times if I need to. So that's pretty much the universal one that I use. All right, so just looking at this as I go. So there you go. That wasn't very long, what, 20 minutes or something, and we've gotten it to where the other one was. And again, you can see everything. You know this is the hat. You know this is hair. You can see the nose, sideburns, ears, mustache, cheeks are in place. We've gone a long way just taking away big chunks of wood. Probably not going to spend a ton of time on this hat, but I do have to, in my eyes, see it a little bit proportionally as I go. So I'm going to mess with it a little bit. Plus, if I'm being honest, it gives me a break for a second. This little spot right here that I'm carving where that little hat flips up a little bit, you do have to be a little careful along the way if you're wrenching on something else and you have your thumb on here because it is going up and down the grain. Those two spots can break. So I would just be careful of your hand placement while you're doing that. All right, let's see here. Still have a little too much hair. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I like to have a lot of texture in my hair. And you can see, if you look at it from the side, you can see how big the finished one's mustache is and how small the other one is. So we're going to get that by, again, removing a lot of wood. Whenever I do hair, I do it the same way every time, and I'm just going to grab 3 tools, and they may or may not be the 3 tools I use, honestly. I tend to go from a wider, flatter gouge, even though this one probably the wrong choice. Let me grab this one so it actually makes sense. From a wider, flatter gouge, which is this number 7, to this number 9, which is a little narrower and a little deeper, to it could be a V-tool, it could be a U-gouge, it could be anything. You know, there's a million options once I get down to the last pass. But I always go over my hair at least 3 times, 4 times if you consider the edges with the knife. So I'm going to start that now. I'm just going to, I don't really care too much about the flow. You know, you hear all of the terminology about making S's and doing all those things, and all of that's correct. I agree with all of it. I just don't worry too much about it. I make mine look a little bit different by the amount of flow that's in it. So you can see all I have here is I have this little line where it's just that V-tool went through there. So I'm going to go in here pretty deep on these. Might be shockingly deep for some of you. I'm going to come out here and come off this edge a little bit. This is what my glove looks like it does. Because to keep it from breaking as it comes off that edge, I tend to run it into my glove. Some of this is really hard to do on camera because some of this, I'm moving quite a bit of wood here. So I may pull it up to my chest occasionally here, get it all out of the view. But I'll come back. Or I won't. So the good news is that when you're on this side, you can make these nice little folds and the grain treats you pretty nice. On this side, not so much. So this side you have to pay a little closer attention to, and sometimes I even come from the back side and just do a little bit of it from the back side. All right, so we've made quite a mess here, which is just the process for me. So I'm gonna try and get rid of some of these little tabs. This tends to expose this spot here a little bit more. We can get a little bit deeper. Notice I left the mustache. Sort of did that by design because I don't want to really mess with that mustache until I've gotten a lot of this other wood out of the way. If I start to mess with the mustache now and then take some more wood out of the way, the mustache won't make any sense really. All right, so that being said, I can see some of these spots that I can get some more in here. And remember, this is just my first pass. I'm coming by with at least a couple more tools. Now, when I say I use 3 tools every time, one thing that you have to consider is every now and then I get to a spot and maybe I've only worked it with 2 tools. Maybe I made the second pass and for whatever reason, the stars aligned and I just like the way it looks. There's nothing that says you can't just leave it. If you get to a spot that you like, just leave it. But I'm typically looking at the end of it most of the time when I'm doing this, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second when I come up with the sideburn. And so most of the time I have to go through the whole process. All right. So now if you look, we picked up quite a bit of bulk on this mustache by getting rid of that. And we certainly did on this side. So, all right. Get my back. Let's look at where we want to go next. Just tucking this ear in there behind that sideburn a little bit, maybe. I'm going to take a little bit of this nose off. It's pretty obnoxious right at the moment. Let's do this. Let's draw a center line in. Here's my next little ridiculous thing that it took me decades to figure out. We all have pencils sitting on the table in front of us. We all have that dried up eraser on the end of it that we're never going to use anyway. And we always pick it up and have the eraser end pointing at the carving. I've now started cutting off the eraser end and sharpening both ends, and I never pick up the pencil wrong again. I'm a genius. It only took me decades to figure that out. Wish I knew where I was going. All right. Going to put a couple lines on the width of this nose. I don't see well side to side. It doesn't matter. I can measure it and I'll still tell you it's not right. But what I can do is if I turn it up and look at it from the top down, I can see the distance then. And somehow I was actually pretty close, which is not really my forte. So pretty happy with that. Usually I have to redo it a couple times. And actually I don't really redo it. I just compensate when I go to build the nose. All right. So I'm going to do a couple things here. It's sort of already here because of the way I just carved it and used the knife. There's the width of the bridge of the nose is sort of already there. But I'm going to draw this line. And again, I'm going to look at it from the top. It's pretty close, closer than I usually am. And I got to find it. It's in here somewhere. I've got a 7mm number 11, and I'm just going to come from this edge over here up to how wide the nose is. And all I'm doing is just taking that, I don't know, 45-degree angle or whatever. I'm just going straight up, straight to that spot. See that? Then I'm just going to come sort of straight across and just nip that tab off of there. All right. So now you can see, you know, just that quickly, I built most of the side of the nose. This part is really, really hard for me to draw. Don't really even know how to draw it, but I'm going to sort of make an eye mound here. I'm carving these kind of, they're kind of cartoony eyes of some description. I don't really know how to. I just started carving them several months ago, and I just love carving them, so I can't get away from them. But they're really nothing more than an eye mound and a couple of straight lines across that creates the opening. The lines are just two parallel straight lines, but you can see, like, this guy looks a little like looks a little suspicious at something. This guy looks a little sad and droopy, and they're the exact same eye. It's just a different in the angle where I drew the parallel lines and where I cut the parallel lines. So, you know, it's a little bit cumbersome to get them set up the way I do it, but we'll go through it and see how it goes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get really deep, because every carving instructor you've ever had in your life tells you that you have to get deep on the inside corner of the eye. So I'm going to do that because that's what they told me to do. So it's really in there deep. And you saw how deep I went in there, and I'm probably not as deep as I'm going to go. I'm going to take and sort of follow this line. Like I said, it's very hard to draw that line. I find I get a better flow if I just carve it and don't draw it. So there's that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. The one thing I've painted myself into a little bit of a corner here on eyebrows. And I could see it coming, but I just decided not to fight with it. I can steal some of it out of that hair if I want to, or I can just have it up underneath the hair and not worry about it. All right, so this eye is a little bit higher than this eye. It's by design. I just don't really want them straight across. I want them to be off a little bit. Let me put this here. What I am going to do is take a little bit bigger tool. If you look at it from the side, you can see that this nose is a little bit just too far out there. Most of my noses have a pretty big, I don't know, I call it a shelf nose. It's got a pretty big square top to it, flat top to it. So I can't look at it like that for very long. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. Again, I'm going to just trim this up a little bit. All I'm doing is shaping it a little bit. Go ahead and take this. Yeah. All right. So now we have the side of the nose we did. We've started the inside corner of the eye. You can see that there's a mound there. You can see this mound is there. It's far from being very well defined, but it is there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. This is a little drape, but basically it's a 3mm dockyard. And I'm just going to go back in the same place as I did. When I told you I probably wasn't as deep as I'm going to get, I wasn't lying. I'm going deeper there. And then I'm going to go ahead and stay in that same channel that I made with, I think it was a 3mm number 11. So I'm going to stay in that same channel, only this time I'm going to do the bottom as well. And like I said, it's really hard to draw, so I tend to just carve it there. So you can see it's a really undefined, bugged eye that's going to get better before it's over. Okay, same thing in here. Going to go pretty deep. Going to follow in that same channel. Maybe cheat a little bit because I can't say I love where that channel was. Get rid of that. And just come out and meet that outside corner. All right. So now, like I said, it's not defined yet. It's pretty ugly at this point. So all I'm doing is softening all of those edges from the gouge and making this a little bit more of a mound. What I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to run a little 16th inch V tool through there as well before it's over. But let me just take this pencil line off because it's distracting. And now if you look, this side is, while it's still bugged out, it's starting to look more like an eye mound. And this side is still just a square mess. So I'm going to come back in here. Same thing, just going to take these corners off. And this is, at the same time, I'm defining the bottom of it a little bit more. And I'm also attempting, my eye here, to even up the two sides of the eyes. I don't really know how successful I'm being until I come back out and look at it, but I'm probably close. Close as we need to be. All right. So now I'm going to take that 16th inch V tool, and just because of the way that that channel is, this eye looked a little bit too big. So I'm just going to steal a little bit of that. This eye looks a little bit too small, so I'm going to steal a little bit of that brow and see if I can get them to come a little more equal. I'm going to switch knives here just because this one has a little bit finer point on it. I usually just use one knife, but that OCC was really, really sharp, so that's why I grabbed it to do that roughing out part. But it's a little bit heavier blade. This has got more flex to it. It's a little bit thinner. So this is the blade I actually used the most, probably. And all I'm doing is making this eye sort of round. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just sort of fiddling. This is just a line going straight through the middle of it that represents the opening, honestly. So that's where we're going to open those eyes up eventually. But for now, we're going to do this side of the nose. This is I think it's a 3/8 number 9. It's a Rammelson. Again, all nines are not created equal. These two are almost the same size tool, but one is way deeper than the other. So the Rammelson works for this. And I'm just going to line it up on the side of this nose here. And I'm just going to push it in and lift it up a little bit. And I'm going to come back and trim off that little tab and create the side of that nose. Do the same thing on the other side. I like to take one little quick look at it, see if I'm remotely close. Rarely am I, so if I don't take that look, I ended up with a really lopsided nose. Now I only have a normally lopsided nose. All right. All right. So I'm going to take and create that wing a little bit. All I'm doing is just a couple roll cuts here. And some of this still needs some refining, but it's getting us to the idea. All right, I'm gonna take this fishtail number 7 that came in the Ramelson starter set that everyone had at some point. I'm gonna do this, this wing, the opening on the nose. You can go ahead and put your lines back on the bottom if you want to. So I have a center line, and then I have the width of that septum. And I'm gonna come in, and instead of just poking straight back, I'm not a big fan of how the just poke straight back looks. So I tend to start it like this and lift up my arm and curve that back to the mustache. And now when you look at it from the side, instead of just seeing the side of the nose and nothing else, you can see into the nose, and you can see that septum just like you really can with a person. Not that it really matters, because most of what I do is a cartoon. But for some reason, that particular part, I like to be able to see. So now I'm going to go up underneath here and trim that tab off. And when I do, I'm undercutting that nose some more. And the reason I'm pushing that knife blade in there so far is because I'm going to come back with a 4mm dockyard. And I'm going to do the exact same cut, same curl and everything, just not as dramatic because I'm not lifting my whole arm up so much. I've just got it in a pencil grip. And the reason I undercut those is because those tabs just pop off when I do that. So now I've got the depth in there. All I'm trying to do is get rid of these pencil marks so they're not distracting. All right. Not really in love with that. All right. So now I'm going to take, and I have no idea what I use here. I can pick up anything from a V-tool to a U-gouge. It really just depends on my mood. And I'm just going to start on this center line, and I'm just going to go straight up pretty deep, right up till it hits that hair. And I'm just going to trim that tab off. And again, depends on my mood, but today I'm going to go ahead and go straight back down on the top of that nose. You got to be a little careful. Can't go in there and tear it off, but all I'm doing is just bringing a spot for this nose to end. You can do it with your knife. I just know that when I do it with my knife, I fight like 10 times to get the sides even. Where if I do it with the V-tool, they start out even. This is what I was telling you. I was painting myself into the corner about the eyebrows. So I'm going to steal a little of this up underneath this hair because we have plenty. I don't mind that it's down onto the eyebrows. That hair hanging down over the eyebrows sort of goes with his look. All I'm doing is just taking that harsh edge off of there. I'm going to do the same thing with this hair that I did with the other hair. And so, as you get into smaller hair, whether it be the sideburns or the mustache, sometimes 3 tools is an exaggeration. Probably only going to do 2 tools or 1 tool and a knife, even maybe up here. But the process and the thought is still the same. So one thing I want to say is I talked about earlier that I'm always looking towards the end, even on my first pass with the hair. And what I mean by that is if you look on here, you can see how I have these ends of these hairs folded up underneath the other hair. So in order to do that, you kind of have to create that flow. So even though I'm on my very first pass with this tool, I'm already thinking about the direction of those final cuts so that I don't have to go back like I'm doing with eyebrows and trying to find eyebrows. If I'd have thought a little earlier there, that would have been better. So right now, and again, I know I keep saying it, but I keep saying it because I broke 1,000 of them. This little piece of wood up here that seems like it should be really strong because it's really big is really weak. So you can see how slowly I went, but you can see now, even with the first pass, I already have a decent amount of flow going. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish this whole top part right here because it's just like a little micro look at what I do throughout the whole thing. So there was my first pass. Again, I'm already thinking about where these things are going to fold. So I'm going to go ahead with my second pass with this V tool. And I just created where all those folds are going to go. So I just went 3 times, and you can already see where I'm going to take little triangles out and make those folds happen. So the rest of it, just going to fight with it a little bit here. It's got a lot of bulk to it. It's kind of cool. I like it. Might take a little piece right here. You can get in more trouble trying to make it better than you need to most of the time. Most of the time, once it looks pretty good, try and leave it alone. Okay, so even though it's only 3 spots, it's 3 spots that I can demonstrate what I'm talking about. It's taken me a long time to be able to try and explain this. I sort of have a way to explain it now that seems to work. When I used to try and explain it, people looked at me like I had 3 heads and they couldn't really see it, but I've finally figured out a way. So you can see this V-tool line is right here. And the next V-tool line is right there. And the next V-tool line is right there. So what I do to fold this underneath there is I take my knife, I just lay it right in the channel of that V-tool, right in the middle of it, and just press forward and make a pretty deep cut. Then I come over here and I make a triangle. Most of the time for it to work, the triangle has to be, and I do not know if this thing will focus on it here in a second. It is. So if you look at it, you can see that triangle is like got almost the same length on the 3 sides. If you do it, so the triangle should look sort of like this, if that makes sense, right? If you make the triangle look like this, they just look like you just pulled a piece out of it and it doesn't keep the flow going. So that, you just go in there that easy and take that little piece out. And now in a second, you can see the difference it looks from how it looked a second ago. Same thing here. I'm going to go right in the channel of that V-tool, rock it forward and stab it in there, create the triangle, trim it off. I'm going to do the same thing here. Here's that V-tool, rock it forward, create the triangle. I don't know, maybe you can see that triangle better. Maybe it'll focus.
Hey, Kevin, the thing is focusing on the chips on your lap and not on the...
Is it?
Yeah, so you might want to just pull it back a little bit and then come back up.
How about that?
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
So there you can see that triangle, and then I'm just going to come in here and cut it off. And now when you look at this hair from the front, it has some flow to it instead of just going down there and ending. This other end over here, it needs a little bit of help, so I'm just going to, I don't need to make the whole triangle because the end of it's already there. And sometimes I'll come in here to push this underneath this hat. And again, it's really fragile right here to do what I'm doing here. So you got 2 problems. You can break it and you can shove your knife in your hand, neither one of which are optimal. So I like that. So it's got a lot going on for that little tiny tuft of hair. All right. How are we doing on time? How much time do we have?
You're good. We're right at an hour, Kevin, so you got a little time.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this eye, and then I'll do one side burn, and we'll probably call that close enough. So I said I drew that line, which represents the opening of the eye. And so to make that work, I go just above it. And, you know, these are pretty thin, squinty, if you will. I make them squintier than this, but the big problem, the squintier you go, the more you're going to hate life when you're painting. So I open them up a little bit. I like to have them look a little snarky and be squinty, but then when you go to paint, it becomes a little problematic. So what I did was I just took and made a stop cut just above that pencil line. Now I'm going to very lightly relieve back to it. And very lightly being the key. I'm going to do the same thing on this side where I really got, this is why I don't draw them, because they're, you know, you're on a bumpy surface, so then that lead gets where you don't want it. So I'm going to do same thing just above the pencil line. Again, I went in there pretty hard, harder than you're probably going to want to go in there until you get used to this. I've carved a bunch of these. I know this knife's sharp, so I, you know, went at it a little more aggressively than maybe is prudent. So theoretically, you have eyes now, right? You have a top lid, you have what could be an eyeball. You could put a bag underneath it if you wanted to. So, I mean, if you wanted to, you could stop there. I'm going to go ahead and now that line's gone, right? Because I carved it off. So it doesn't really much matter because you have the other line that you carved. So I'm going to carve another stop cut, however wide I want that eye open, and just make it parallel to the line that I already have. Then I'm going to come in here. Again, the bottom, this bottom lid is pretty fragile as well. So you can see I'm not taking, you're not taking off much wood to make the opening of this eye. I'm going to take it a little bit deeper on the inside and outside corner, just to give it a little bit of roundness. I don't care a lot, but I care a little bit. That was not good. That was the bottom lid. Not really the end of the world, it just means I have to go deeper. I come in here and just take it a little bit deeper. The inside corner is definitely going to be deeper now. The same thing on the other side, minus the breaking. At least that's the plan. You can see those are just tiny little slivers I'm taking out there. Let's try for the inside and outside corner again without the breakage. Might have it. This seems good. So now if we can get it to look at it, you can just see those little slivers are there. And you need a pretty fine pencil at this point. You can have him looking whichever way you want. I have him looking to the side, but not all the way to the side. So he's looking over to the side a little bit, but there is still some white of the eye on the outside of where I'm drawing the pupil. So there you have those eyes. I don't usually put much of a bag or anything underneath it because, you know, it's already kind of, that bottom lid is kind of puffy. so I don't worry too much about it. I do put a lot of wrinkles and stuff in his face. Most of it, I just make his cheeks kind of sunken. I just think that sort of fits the character. So that's what I'm doing here, is taking out a little bit of that. Let's see about this eyebrow that I've butchered over here a few times. Just bringing that eyebrow out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit out of some of these corners up here where the forehead and the hat and everything meet. You see it's just a little fat right there for that eyebrow, so I'm just going to take a little bit of it out. So remember, I did the one side of the sideburn. I did it with that number 9. Again, like I said, the smaller sections, I changed the rules a little bit compared to the bigger sections. So this is a 5mm number 11. And just as I did before, as I'm doing these cuts, I'm already setting up where those folds are going to go. So the way these fold on this underneath on the side, so it's not just a straight line coming down, that's where each one of those cuts that I just made are going to be. Never finished the bottom of the ear here, so I just do something like that for now. Same thing over here. All these cuts I'm making are where the folds are going to be. And by the same idea, I'm going to go ahead and get this first round in on the mustache. Again, my caveat is I usually use 3 times, but smaller pieces of hair, I might go less. So this is that, I think it's a 3/8 number 9. When it gets down here, I'm just going to blend that into the other side. Can't go too much further on the mustache though, because I have to do the other part of the beard before I can go to the next level of the mustache. Same thing though, even though I'm doing that, all of these cuts, I'm thinking about where those folds are going to go. Doesn't mean they're going to stay in exactly the spot I'm putting them right now, but I am getting the general flow there so that it'll work. All right, so do a couple more quick things. This sideburn is, I've gone over it twice. Now I'm going to take this V tool. I think it's a, I don't know, 1/4 inch maybe. And again, I'm thinking about these folds. When you're doing these sideburns and you're doing the rest of it, you have to keep going in the same direction with this tool. You're going to want to turn over and take this tool and go back this way, but you have to come from off the wood onto this sideburn or you will tear it up. The grain will get you. Same thing here. I'm in the V-tool groove, just going to rock it forward. Put that there, V-tool, rock it forward. V-tool, rock it forward, put it there. Of course, I should get the whole thing. And I just did that, all 3 of them at once. And now I'm just going to come in here and trim this tab off, this tab off, this tab off. And again, this is not cleaned up, but cleaned up, now you can see that that hair folds and is just straight up and down. All right, a couple more quick things. Eyebrows. I don't like to do just a single row of eyebrows. That doesn't, it's not saying anything about people that do it that way. I just like to have it a little bit different. I do a lot of dry brushing, so I want facets for that dry brushing to catch. So I start, if there was an imaginary center line in that eyebrow, I start above that center line. And again, that one goes up underneath the hair, and I'm okay with that. And I just go from the center line up, and I make my eyebrow whatever flow I want it to have, whether it's curved or standing up or whatever it's doing. Okay, so there's the first pass. Then I come back with the second pass from the bottom up towards that center line. And I'm trying my best to not just now run into the other one and make it just one long cut. It's going to happen some, but if you go in there with two passes, now I have just a little bit more flow on there. You can maybe see it on this one. It's hard to see, but there's a couple of passes on that eyebrow. And I'm going to do an ear and be done. So I just do some wedge cuts for my ears. All I want, you know, for me, the ear has a few things it needs. It needs that little flappy thing, and it needs a deep hole behind it. And it's got sort of a little bit of a ridge around the outside. If you can make people believe it has those three things, that's all I care about. So let me get rid of some of these pencil marks. One time in my life, I put a tool away. So what I'm doing here is I've made that deep stop cut, and I'm still just going down there and just cupping the inside of that ear. Sometimes when I have this 7 in my hand doing that, it just makes sense. It fits the top of the ear the sizes I do a lot. So sometimes I just use it to shape that ear up a little bit. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to make a few wedge cuts, and it's going to be my ear done. So that's sort of a backwards question mark looking thing. I'll draw it on the other side because it looks a little bit more like the question mark. And on these particular things, ears can be fragile anyway, but these are really pretty dangerous. So, you know, you got to pay a little bit of attention here. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a wedge cut and get rid of that pencil line. I'm going to follow over here, make another wedge cut. And again, you can lop this whole ear off pretty easily right here and get rid of that pencil line. I'm going to come in here. Now, this is important. I'm trying to save this flappy thing here, so I don't want to undercut it. So you can see I have my knife. Try and get it where you're getting rid of the pencil line, and I have my knife pointing out away from it so that it's actually building up that piece of wood rather than undercutting it. I'm going to do the same thing here. This is the one place that you really can't do it with a wedge. You do have to sort of do it with your knife tip. But if you're careful, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now I've got that in there, got that flappy thing. Here's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm going to put a straight cut. And again, this is not very deep, right? So you got to think about that. I'm going to put a straight cut down there and just cut the point off of that little triangle on the flappy thing. And then I'm just going to come in here and complete that chip. So that I just have a little 3-cut chip that 99 times out of 100 comes right out unless it's on the camera. And so now for me, I have the ridge outside. I have the little flappy thing. I have the hole behind it. It's close enough. For me, it's an ear. All right. So I think I'm going to call it there. I've gone through everything. Didn't get it finished, but we got a long way. If you have questions, I'd be glad to answer them. If not, I'd be glad to have a beer.
What tool do you use to go over the beard the next time?
So I used that 9 the first time, and there is no right answer here. It's whatever I know is sharp in my box. It's whatever I feel like. Often it's something like this. This is a Swiss number 9, and it's a little bit deeper. So I'm going to come in here and I don't discount the S idea or the curves. I do move my hand around and get some stuff in there. But I'm just going to come in here and I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I really don't know where I'm going most of the time. And that's not just in carving beards. So, you know, I would be somewhere in like that. And again, going back to building up this mustache, some of these cuts going up to this mustache are going to be really, really deep. Now, let me just jump in here and say I forgot one big part of this whole beard speech. So if you do the first pass, right, and you have all of these hills and valleys, so to speak, it would make no sense for me to come in with this second tool and just stay in the valleys and make that deeper, or to take off all the hills, because then it would just be taking all of the mass away. So when I come back the second and third time, I am crossing over the, you know, the hills and the valleys and everything from the other, like for instance, here where you can see where those tool marks were. I'm not just going to lay in here and do the same tool marks. And I'm not going to go next to them and take off all of that area, or it just will not work. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go across some of the hills, go through some of the valleys. And usually when I'm done, and I can say this, I might take a shade more time than I'm doing here, just look at where I was going. And usually when I'm done, you can identify, if you wanted to, all three of the tools that I used. You'd be able to go back and go, oh, I can still see the remnants of that 5/8 number 9. I can see that quarter number 9. I can see the V tool. So if I took a little bit more time, you would be able to see a little bit more of that, and that it does make a difference. But you can see just by doing that, you can see remnants of both tools there. And it's hard to see on here because it's painted, but I mean, I used probably a 3 or 4 millimeter number 11, a V tool, and probably that number 9. But, you know, it just gives me facets for the dry brushing. It gives you some depth. But anyway, any other questions?
Kevin, can you just quickly touch on how you finish your carvings?
Poorly. Yeah, I paint dry because I don't like the oils and all of that stuff. I've tried several methods over the years. I paint dry, really thinned acrylics. I want to be able to see the wood if I can. I like the more grain I can see, the better. I don't care if it's in the face. I don't care where it is. I just like to see the grain. And after I paint it, I dip it in boiled linseed oil. I don't tint it. I don't cut it with mineral spirits. I don't do any of that. I don't seem to have a lot of the problems that I hear about, or I just don't care enough and don't make it a big enough issue. And after I do that, while it's still wet, let me reach back here. Oh. While it's still wet, I have some Howard Speed and Wax. I have 2 different containers of Howard Speed and Wax. One has about 1 inch of burnt umber oil, artist oil paint in it, and one is just the clear yellow that it comes. So, like for instance, I don't want a lot of darkness on this white beard. I don't want it, certainly don't want it on my eyes. I don't want it on my skin tone too much. Depends on what I'm doing. So I will come in with just the clear yellow wax, and I'll paint everything that I want to stay like the linseed oil has it. Anywhere that I want shadows, like in between all of this, whatever this garment is on this Viking, deep in the armpits or in this arm here, between the fingers, wherever I want shadow, I take that tinted Howard's wax. And again, it takes a little bit of time and finesse to figure out, do I want it as dark brown as I have it? If I don't want it quite that dark brown, I will take and mix it like on a palette on a paper plate and put it on the carving. But for instance, that wood shield is bare wood. It's bare wood with dipped in linseed oil, and then that's the tinted Howard's feed and wax that caused all that shadowing and all that grain look. So I put the dark wax on, and now it's a crapshoot. Takes a little bit of time to learn the product, and I leave it on for somewhere between 5 minutes and 24 hours, depending upon how much I want it to do. And the wood grain on that Viking is closer to the 24-hour than the 5 minutes. So, that's the way I get the shading. I don't have the patience to learn to shade. I hate to paint. Painting is just a chore. So this is the way that I found that I can get some shade in there and get some depth without having to work too hard. And then, as strange as this sounds, after 2 or 3 days after the wax is dried, I do, especially if it's a go-by and I'm going to carry it around and people are going to handle it, I do spray it with some satin poly, even over the wax. While it doesn't sound like it should work, I've never had a problem. That's it.
Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about the CCA meeting coming up and the classes there?
Yeah, thanks. So, as they've been beaten to death every week, I'm sure you're hearing about the Carving the Rockies event, which is great. I do say that as an event, and that's what we plan on it being, more than just a show. We're trying to make it, a really cool event. We know we have to walk before we can run, and we'll see how it works out. And I know the competition, it's going to be interesting. The competition is going to be judged a little bit differently, which is cool. Everybody's going to have a say, which is kind of cool. I think that's a great addition to improve the competition. The classes are really what I'm in charge of. So that's what I want to talk about. And basically all I want to say is that there's 60 openings and we're already almost 2/3 full. So if you're considering going and you want to take one of the classes, then you should look at it sooner rather than later. So that's really about all I had on that. We hope that it's a tremendous success, and we hope that we get to see a lot of you that we see on Saturdays for that weekend.
And if they want to sign up, Kevin, where do they need to go? Onto
the CCA website, and then the Carving the Rockies. Once you get in, it takes you right to Carving the Rockies, and then there's everything up there. Classes. You can sign up for the Saturday night social there. I think that's all there is to sign up for tickets. So, but that's one of the places, or one of the things you can do on that Carving the Rockies section of the CCA website. All
right, Kevin. So we're at 25 after. I just want to come on again, like the others have already said. Thank you for coming on again. You're always a big supporter of the International Association of Woodcarvers, and we appreciate you taking time out to do a demonstration. Hope everybody's benefited from the stuff that Kevin shared, and he's got a website out there, secondalarmwoodcarving.com. He offers rough outs there. He talks about any of the classes and stuff he has coming up, so make sure you go out and check out his website and see what's coming up. Want to say a couple of things, and then we're going to get to the drawing real quick. This is truly a international group that we have getting together today. We had people on from the Netherlands, from Wales, and from Italy. So again, encourage people to come on and meet with us every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do this every week. We feel like it's a benefit not only to just local carvers, but carvers throughout the world. So make sure you share this as much as possible. One other thing coming up in the coming weeks as far as presenters. Next week, we've got Dave Francis coming on. He's going to talk a little bit about his carving journey. He's been carving over 40 years. So check that out next week. After that, Rich Snyder, Roger Bean. I saw Roger on today. He's going to be presenting for us on the 12th. Ray Myers on. He's going to be presenting on the 19th. So we got quite a good lineup coming up all the way through April. If you know anybody who'd like to come on and do a demonstration, tell them to reach out to myself, Dave and Thom, and we'll get you on the schedule. And again, thank you all for joining us. At this time, we'll go ahead and do the drawing. We're going to do the drawing for the International Association of Woodcarvers prize pack, which is a hat, a shirt, and some stickers. And then we're also going to do a drawing for the finished carving that Kevin's working on today. You don't have to be present to enter, so you don't have to feel like you have to stick around. We'll reach out to the people that win the drawings and make sure we get their information from them and get those out. And again, next week we'll have Dave Francis on, and I believe we also have a Helvie knife that we're going to be doing a raffle on. So join us next week for that. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Thom so that he can do the drawing.
All right. Hey, everybody. First off, Kevin, thanks so much. That was a fantastic demo. Bear with me. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
All right. So we had 201 entries for this giveaway. And first, we're going to give away the prize pack. So number 16, which we'll go over here. Number 16 is Mark Johnson. And Mark, we will be in contact with you. And then for the finished carving from Kevin, number 167, which is right there, Dan Holgrave. Thank you very much for everyone who has entered our giveaway, and we'll see you next week. Back to you, Blake.
All right, guys. Thanks, everyone, for joining in today. Again, this has been the International Association of Woodcarvers, where carvers are helping carvers. Again, we'll meet next week, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you join us then, and we thank you for taking time out and joining us today. Thank you all.